Good afternoon, everybody, and we're back with our Thursday Live. I'm Bhavna, and I'm from Artisanry Co. We're a social enterprise based up in Edinburgh, and we support local artists and makers. Every Thursday, we bring somebody along, and we have a chat about what their work is, and how they're coping in this very, very difficult time. So today we have with us Darren Evans, and I'm just going to invite him, if you bear with me just for a moment. I am going to try and see if this works better today. There we go. Oh, and it doesn't give me the option to do it. It's been sent. Hi, Emma. Thanks for listening in. And hi, Anna. Good to see you as well. Thank you very much for joining us. Just waiting for Darren to join us. In the meanwhile, a brief about who we are. We're a social enterprise, like I said, right at the start. We support local artists, we support local makers, and our mission is to create a sustainable local economies. And the way we do it is by giving marketing and business development support to the makers, and we provide a lot of different kinds of support. We do run workshops run workshops. We essentially try and upskill everybody. Oh, there's Darren. I'm just going to try and see if it still says waiting for him to join. So I'll keep talking in the meanwhile. And while we run workshops, we also do what all do we do? We write content. We provide you support with content. We provide you support with how to do it yourself. More importantly, we request I have go live with Darren. There we go. I think it should now work. So and the way we and what we also have. Hi, Darren.
All right.
Good to have you. Thank you very much for joining us. I just waiting while I was waiting for you.
That's all right.
I'm beginning to get better at it. Thank you. So thank you everybody who's joined us so far. I'm Bhavna and I'm from Artisanry. And I have Darren with me today. Darren's an artist. I really love your work. It's beautiful. And as I keep saying to everyone, I just wish I'd have a few more walls and a slightly bigger bank balance, and I would be happier. So I'm going to pass it back to you, Darren. Give us a bit of introduction about yourself, what you do, how you do it, are you full-time, self-taught, so that sort of information.
Yeah. So watercolor artist, and it's my main business now, but it wasn't always. I think, just going back to the beginning, it sort of started when I was at school. It was just my favourite thing, and I was always spent a lot of time drawing and scribbling. I'd always got a pencil in my hand, and when I was at school, that was the thing that it was the lesson that I used to look forward to, and I'd sort of immerse myself in it. But then I was also good at other things like science, and so got thrown down the sort of route of architecture, which was seen as being a bit more commercially viable than art. And so studied that at university, and still it just didn't quite tick the right boxes for me. And I've sort of said before, once I'd come out, I found myself sort of designing building society branch office toilets and pub car parks and this sort of thing, and it kind of wasn't what I wanted to be doing. And so drifted out of architecture and strangely into sort of finance, and worked it. Yeah, I know. A very odd sort of choice, and sort of rumbled along in that for a long time. But there was always this sort of little trapped artist in there who was desperate to get out, and I used to sort of paint things for birthdays and Christmas and things like that for people. But I never really sort of made the sort of full investment in it. And then one year I just thought, this is ridiculous. I don't enjoy what I'm doing. I love doing this. And so I set up the Suburban Artist, started doing these little house portraits for people. People loved them, and then it sort of grew from there, and set up little websites and various shops online, and it just started to grow, and I just loved it. And after a couple of years, I was sort of lucky enough to be able to sort of switch out of the old job and do this a bit more full time. So I sort of did it full time, but also with a bit of looking after the kids and dealing with the family type stuff as well. So, sometimes it gets squeezed into the mornings and the late nights. But that was it really. So that's kind of how I sort of drifted into it, and where I am now. It's a lot of sort of commissioned watercolor artwork, and I do a few speculative pieces as well, which I which I sell on your platform on Artisanry. But yeah, that's kind of where I am.
So did you study art at all, or this is something that you've developed over years?
So it was really just something that I did at school, and then after that, it's just been experimenting and sort of playing around. So I would say self-taught, really. It's it's funny why you sort of focus in one particular medium rather than another. And
Yeah.
I sort of wondered often like how it was that I got into watercolor. But I think because my style is quite illustrational, or it started off as being quite illustrational, watercolor sort of lends itself to that more than other mediums. And then it becomes the thing that you do. And then if you try and pick up oils or pastels or something else and you draw with them or paint with them, there's so much to learn, and it kind of becomes quite intimidating. And you produce something that looks like one of your kids' drawings, and it's like it's a bit disheartening. So I think you just you stick with something that and then the more you get into watercolor, the more you find that there's this sort of fascinating world of of complexity around it. And so you just I don't know that it's just managed to sort of keep me occupied for all these years, really.
So when did you make the switch from full time?
So from finance, I mean, it was full time about 18 months ago. But I'd been running the Suburban Artist for about 2 years prior to that, and that was sort of weekends and evenings, and you find that it's not just the difficulty is not really doing the actual paintings. That's the sort of fun bit, and that's what I really like doing. It was that you have to keep updating your website, keep marketing, keep pushing out sort of on social media, and trying to build that presence on social media. It's quite daunting. You start off on Instagram, like I've got a lot of help from the kids, but you start off on there and you've got like 1 or 2 followers, and you're trying to sort of build it up, and it's like it's quite a long road. So it took me as I say, a couple of years or 2 or 3 years before I was in a position where there's enough money coming in, and you've got enough confidence in the work that you're doing to start to sort of go it alone. It's because it can be quite daunting. I think one of the big issues with selling artwork is trying to get people to buy artwork, and I think trying to get people to pay a reasonable amount of money for the effort that you've put into it, and particularly pay that online for something they haven't seen. I think that feels like the real sort of challenge for me. And so I think where I was interested in when we spoke initially about Artisanry Co is that because you're developing this community, it draws people in, and then when people are when clients are coming to look for one thing, they'll look for other things, and it tends to be people who are a bit more open to buying stuff from an online platform.
No, that's absolutely correct. And I suppose COVID has pushed people against the wall, and there isn't too much of a choice but to adapt. And for many years, like I come from finance, and for years and years I've sort of said to people that I can work the same amount from home and be able to give the flexibility with children, but wasn't something that people understood, and completely different. But COVID's now pushed people against the wall, and they've had to learn very quickly.
Well, the thing is, I think on the positive side, if people are spending a lot of time at home, it would be good for them to have some nice things to look at. I've got lots of artwork around my house. I really like things. I like things that have been made from little handmade brooches to you know, paintings, like, you know, bags, things like that. Just anything that people make. I really, you know, I like that. But, you know, I think it's trying to get that into people. You know, because some people who are creative and I think can visualize things, they can sort of see it and they, you know, they're happier to buy things online. I think sometimes other people find it slightly more difficult, and I think it's how you wish to go about sort of convincing those sorts of people that you know it's safe and good to buy stuff, you know, to buy art stuff online. You know, there's a lot. I mean, when I look through Artisanry, there's some really great stuff on there, and I listen to these live chats, and some of the people who've been on there, you know, there's some really incredible, you know, stuff out there.
No, that's you're absolutely right, and I have to put my hand up and say that until I got into Artisanry, I hadn't sort of ever thought of buying artwork online either. And I consider myself in a generation which is very familiar with technology.
Yeah.
And
it's. I mean, I've bought things online, but I've bought. You know, I'd have an idea for a painting that I wanted for, say, my living room, and so I'd search and go through lots of, you know, but then there's a limit as to how much you would spend online for something. I think, you know, I think you want, if you're investing a large amount of money and you're going to be looking at something for a long period, you want to make sure that you have got some sort of, you know, that you maybe had a good look at it. I don't know. I mean, we did. I'm part of a local arts group called Woodford Arts Group, and we hosted an online exhibition, because we normally do 2 or 3 exhibitions a year, and we hosted our most recent one, and it got cancelled because of COVID. And so we looked into sort of, you know, what technology could sort of support a virtual gallery, and we set up the virtual gallery. And, you know, we had thousands of people come to look at our work. And for a group of sort of local artists, there's some really great work there, you know, from sculpture through to photography, oil and watercolour painting. And, you know, I was surprised that given how many people walked through this virtual gallery, looked at all these great paintings, you know, there was very, very few people actually parted with cash for these things. And we got lots of great feedback that people loved the work. But, you know, it just seems it's tricky for people to sort of, I don't know, make that investment, to sort of take that next step. And I think, you know, we just, as you say, as people spend more and more time at home, we just need to, you know, get the idea into their heads that you know, buying art online is a more acceptable thing to do.
Yeah, great. And you know, how do we go about it? And I think I do wonder how is that we can change that perception of people that buying online is safe, and it's not every you know, that as an artist you're not there to con people, but, you know, just art like anybody else. So
yeah, I mean, I think you know, particularly when you look at the you know, I think having chats like this and showing that there are real people behind you know, behind this stuff obviously helps. And when you know, when you look through all the different types of you know, of arts and crafts and the makers that, you know, that you see on the Artisanry site, you know, I haven't come across anyone that looked particularly dodgy that I thought would be trying to stitch me up. So, you know, I think it's a very good thing to do. I think it's the right thing to do, but I just think it just takes a little bit of time. But I think, you know, the longer people are locked down and the more time they get frustrated looking at their, you know, plain walls, the more chance that we've got to sell some stuff. So, you know, I think it might be worth a little marketing push now to, you know, to try and convince a few people to part with some cash. But,
and you know, we are putting in as much in marketing. In fact, Lisa and I've spent doing some creatives and sort of restarting some of our Christmas ads and various other things. And I do think visual art has a place in the online market. It requires awareness. It requires a lot more marketing. But people are beginning to realize that there is an online world that you and trust. And like you said, these chats help. I think the other thing that really helps is your own website. And I think I was speaking to Emma last week, and she was saying she has her website, but not as many to the website because bringing the footfall is challenging. But I do think those websites are really key because people do want to go and see your work. People do want to know that you're an authentic person.
Yeah.
So it is almost your website and the authenticity that Artisanry can bring as a social enterprise as we grow and develop, and people see the work we're able to put in. It brings a greater degree of trust around the brand.
Yes, I totally agree, and I think it's right that you have to have a bit of a story that people can understand. They want to be able to. They're not just buying the piece of work. They want to be able to sort of say a little bit about the person that sort of sits behind it. And I think your website can really help with that. I mean, I used to sell a lot of things when I started out. I used to sell a lot of paintings to friends and people I worked with, and I always used to feel terrible about doing that because I sort of felt like I'm not becoming an artist in my own right. I'm just relying on friends. But someone said to me, they said no, because actually you're thinking about that completely the wrong way around. People want to buy it from someone they can say, I know this person and they did that. They're proud of the fact that they know someone who can make this, and I think that's where Artisanry can help, because it becomes this sort of trusted name where people go if they want to get something that you might go on there looking for a handmade leather bag, but you might end up leaving with a wool handmade brooch or something else. But when you're on there, that you've got this community of like-minded people who are all at home beavering away to make these sort of great these great handmade items. So I really like the idea, and the other alternatives are just they just feel far too commercial and not really what I'm about, and what I think when I see people in these live chats, it doesn't feel like it's that. But until Artisanry came along, then there aren't very many other options. So
no, thank you very much for saying that. I do think that, or I do hope some more and more people would go down social enterprise route, because it's such an amazing mix between commercial and a charity, because it's almost like having your own funding source in a way. So on the profit, eventually the profits from the online platform would pay for the rest of the effort that gets in. And I think if companies were to run with that ethos, what we can create in terms of local sustainable economies is incredible. I keep saying to people, there's this young girl in our community who's got a Kick Bell, which is a community interest company, which is what we are. And it's just lovely to see, young people are going down that route. So I think there is a lot more awareness these days. People are keen to understand where the money is going. Is it being utilized? How is, the openness and the transparency around it is key. I was going to also ask you, I'd written a few things just in terms of, so we ended up talking about the whole online thing. You're about 2 years into your months into your journey as a full-time artist, and what 4.5 years otherwise. And when you made the switch from financial career into this, is it because you had a lot of support from family and friends? How?
Well, it was there were sort of a few things that were happening at the same sort of time, and as with these, when you have these sort of big changes in your life, it's often a sort of series of events that all sort of combine together to make things happen. And so, we'd got members of the family who needed a bit more support. We'd got, a few things that were happening sort of externally. And it just makes you sort of question what you're doing with your life, and are you properly happy? And is your family life as good as it can be? Not just financially or whatever. It's like, if you're not actually happy, the people around you aren't happy. And we sort of got to this point where we were all sort of sat around talking about it and thought, we're all working very hard and we're sort of miserable as hell. So we sort of thought, we need to change something. And so because Suburban Artist had been growing, and and I was really enjoying doing that, we decided that I would step back from my work to do this, but it also gave me the bandwidth to help with the with the family and stuff. So it's still I'm still getting lots of work through it. I just about be able to sort of look after myself, but I wouldn't be able to sort of support the full family on it just by myself. So it takes at the moment we're still sort of transitioning into growing and growing, and but I think as most artists will know, it's not you're doing it more for the love of doing it,
Yes.
and it's paying the bills. But you're not going to be driving around in a Ferrari any time in the near future. Not that I particularly want to, but it's just it's a different approach to sort of living your life. And I think that once you've got your head around that, I mean, we found that we're all a lot happier. There's a lot more sort of positivity about the place, and and I think it teaches the children as well. Sort of, you can not do a big corporate job. You can, trust your sort of, your feelings and do something that is creative. And you have to work hard at it. It's not like you just sort of sit there ruminating over a picture and just produce something. You have to think about what you're doing, create it, market it. There's a lot of work involved in sort of marketing yourself, marketing your artwork. And it becomes a sort of all-consuming full-time job. And then that brings you to one of my big gripes, which is the amount of money that people are prepared to pay for a piece of art versus the amount of effort that goes into it is often very disjointed. And and I think that that's something that I think will change as time goes on. I think there is a sort of when I speak to my kids, there is a the idea of sort of just going out, earning as much money as you can, and just splurging it on sort of where consumable goods doesn't that sort of it's it's still there, but they are more interested in in sort of where things come from, doing things in the right way, having the right values, and understanding that sort of story of things. And I think over time that will start to change or improve, I should say.
No, I would, yeah, very much agree with it. And I think again, COVID's brought all to our knees, and has sort of forced us to have a very hard look at the life we lead, and the choices we've made in the past. Irrespective of where it's come from, the fact that we've really abused our environment, we've really abused everything that we have and taken it for granted, and it's all coming back to us.
Yeah.
People are very conscious. People are wanting to know, how are you sustainable? What are you doing that is, and I think before, it disproportionately falls on smaller independent makers and artists to be more sustainable. Nobody will ask Amazon. I mean, sometimes I get an Amazon and it's the size of the box is bigger than, about 20 times bigger than the article or the product that's come in the box. But nobody's asking that from Amazon. But try doing that as an artist or a small maker, and people will be up in arms. So there is a higher degree of disproportionate responsibility that sits on you, but you have a very valid point that the price doesn't reflect it. And it's not just art. I think every artist would perhaps agree here that they cannot charge what they really think they are worth, because people are not yet prepared to pay for it.
Yeah. But I think that's, and again, I think that changes, and it just takes time. And I think it just takes people, I think people are prepared to pay more when they, understand what's gone into it. They've taken the time to understand, the effort involved, and they understand the story of the person. And I think, and that's where you need the platforms and you need the website just to be able to sell that sort of story, and I think, I mean, I've had, a lot of people sort of quibble with me over pricing of certain paintings on my website when, I think, some of them are very reasonably priced. But, you forget that sometimes people don't have that much disposable money. And so then to pay £200 for a painting seems like a lot. But then, given it's probably taken me, 2 or 3 days to make that painting, it's
Nothing. No, I mean, I think my biggest grouse is that when I worked in financial services and I contracted for a long time, I don't think anybody ever bargained and said, oh, it was so that you didn't go in and say, oh, would you reduce by a 10 or 20 or 30? So why? Why that here? I don't get it. No.
I don't. But I just think, you're absolutely right, and I'm not sure why that is, but I think, but just as you grow, as people's awareness grows, and as people find that there are places that they can go to get proper handmade artwork, I think that that changes. I mean, I think you can look at things like, I mean, I know people who bought on through like the more commercial platforms, like Not on the High Street and things like this, where stuff is a lot more kind of mass produced, and they've seen, oh, like you can buy a house portrait for £20, and when it's like, well, nobody can produce a portrait of a house for £20, and then it's done with software that takes it from a photograph, and they're a bit disappointed, and it's like, well, it's because you're not paying enough money for the job that you want doing, but you've got it and that's it, and people have had their fingers burned and they don't want to do it again, and they get sort of nervous. So I don't know. I think the more that you can raise the profile of something like Artisanry, where people can see good quality things and they know to come to a particular place, then I think the better it will be.
I would agree, and I think it'll take us time to build that awareness in the brand. And as a company, we don't just sell artwork, and that's something that was very conscious right from the start. Even when we were not selling, I was very conscious that it was the story and the maker that we wanted to introduce to the world. Which I felt was more important. And our research says that people are more keen to buy from somebody they know the face behind it. They know the story.
Yeah.
That's why the videos that we do, the marketing we do, it's very focused on come buy from us, but meet this maker and then come and buy from us. It's not just here's a painting and go and buy, because I don't think I will ever be in a position where I would want to put a painting on the wall, artist I didn't know, because there's such a nicer feeling to have something somebody in your home. And there's always a story to tell when, once again, we can invite human beings into our that happens. But until then, to be able to look at a wall and actually feel the pleasure of art and what you can see is important.
Yeah. No, I totally agree.
I was going to ask you, Darren, do you only do watercolors, or do you do like a lot of our artists also do homeware? But I've been meaning to ask you for a while, do you do anything in homeware as well?
In what, sorry?
Like a lot of our artists do homeware products as well, where they use them to, do you do something like that, or are you very focused only on art?
Yeah, I mean, it's really watercolor. I mean, the thing is, I dabble with lots of other things, and I'm sort of quite handy, but everything I do, just other than watercolor, tends to be sort of quite disastrous. So I tend to, it's like, as I said before, when I've dabbled in different mediums, it's like, it tends to look like, kids have done it, and it just doesn't look very good. So, I stick to sort of drawing. I think, pencil sketching, very good, watercolor, then everything else sort of drops off. And, even things like, I don't know, there's just something that outside that, if I try DIY or decorating around the house, it's just a disaster. So, and, it's got, like, what I find is it quite staggering that I can be so meticulous and pay such attention to detail in some things, and then other things are like so bad. So I just don't know. It's just kind of the way my hands work, I think. No, I mean, I think the closest thing I've got. So what I did this year was I was looking for some Christmas cards, and and you know, I never cease to be frustrated at how sort of you know, bad most of the sort of you know, shop bought Christmas cards are. And so I sort of thought, well, I'll just create a little range of 6 little cards for myself, and I'll just sort of try and sell those. So I wouldn't call it homeware, but it's a break from the sort of big watercolor stuff. And I've put those the 6 different designs onto the Artisanry site. But yeah, that's as close to homeware as I've got.
No, I meant I think a lot of artists use their prints to make, I don't know, things like cushions and things like coasters and things. Is that something that you've never thought of going down the route of?
Because a lot of my stuff tends to be quite quite specific to, you know, a person will commission it because it is a you know, it's like a wedding venue or their house or the street they grew up in and things like this. So it doesn't easily lend itself to that type of thing. I mean, I think for the more speculative work it might do, but I mean but really, you know, it's yeah, I think it probably works best on the wall rather than on your sofa.
And how big do your paintings usually tend to be? What's the size?
So the commissioned works tend to be about A3 size. But when I've done paintings, you know, myself, I've done, you know, big ones of London, of the Thames. I'm quite fascinated by sort of the Thames and the city and these types of things. And those ones, they're sort of, you know, A1, they're over a metre square. And
Wow.
that in watercolour is quite, you know, unusual. And those I put, you know, there's a lot of different sort of materials and media that I use in there to sort of build up a real sort of depth and intensity. So some of the work that I do tends to be quite traditional, sort of very traditional watercolour in nature. And then some of the bigger pieces are not, you know, using quite bold colours, quite a lot of colour, quite sort of intense pigments, a lot of sort of masking fluid and building the paint up in sort of lots of layers and sort of plaster and things like that. So, you know, it goes from very traditional to sort of totally not traditional sort of use of watercolour. But yeah, size ranges. I think the biggest restriction, you know, it tends to be how much people are prepared to pay.
Yes.
And so the balance there tends to be around A3 size for something that, you know, is in the price range that most people want to pay for a wedding venue portrait or a house portrait. And then, you know, depending upon whether somebody has got something special in mind, they go up in size. And, you know, for me personally, when I'm just experimenting, I will do sort of bigger paintings just because I like, you know, trying different things. So.
Perfect. Just coming up to time as well, and we've quite a few who've joined. How about a very quick intro in the last couple of bits, and then we will close
Okay.
first. Then Darren.
So yeah, do you want just to give another recap of me?
Who you are, because a few people have joined towards the end.
Yeah, sure. So Darren Evans, watercolor artist, and I'd say illustrationist, because some of the paintings tend to be a little more like illustrations, but do a lot of custom artwork, house portraits, wedding venues, you know, street scenes, places where people grew up, and things that I call life stories, which depict the sort of meaningful places in your life. You know, whether it's that, you know, the houses that you've lived in, your favourite football ground, you know, your favourite pubs, these types of things, which all look, you know, very nice presents for people, and yeah, and that's what I do really.
And I'm thank you, Darren. I'm Bhavna, Artisanry. We're a social enterprise and an online platform, but on the profit side, we support local artists, local makers with marketing and business development support. And our mission is to create local sustainable economies. So before I let you go, I did have a question, which is I'd written it down and then slipped my mind. Oh, yes, I remember. You trained as an architect. So is that something that shows in your work as well?
Well, I think it probably, I think it probably does. In the, the drawings tend to be, some of them can be quite technical, and I think I am interested in buildings, hence all the sort of building portraits, and I like, the individuality of different buildings, and from Victorian sorts of grand houses and museums down to sort of little rural cottages in Ireland. I've drawn, or to modern football stadiums. I've drawn all sorts of things, but I really like getting into the sort of technical detail of all the little bits and pieces that sort of that make different buildings unique. I've drawn kebab houses to restaurants to palaces to all sorts of things. So I think probably there is there is something from the architectural past that sort of links into that.
I wouldn't ask you about the finance side because it'll just become very soulless. But
Yeah, I mean, I think it was just it's very good to do something that's a bit of a that was very that I didn't enjoy, that then got me to focusing on what I really did enjoy. So in a way, it sort of served its purpose. I mean, I used to sit on conference calls doodling away, and and it was people would come past and say, what have you done? And you tell the story of I used to be an architect, and people say, oh, you're wasting your time. You need to be drawing, and it's all that over time just built up and gave me the sort of confidence to step out and do something different. So it served its purpose in a way.
yes, I would agree. I mean, I think all the dots connect at the end in a bizarre way. I think the last question before we end this, if what would you say to people who are in that place where you were 2 years ago,
Yeah.
think whether should I change and will I be able to pay my bill? How am I going to survive? What advice to somebody who's newer in the journey than you are?
Well, I think there's a few things. I think first of all, you should be following your heart. I think you've got to do something that deep down feels right. Otherwise, you just won't feel that fulfilled, and and you will be a bit miserable. That said, you've got to put food on the table, and you'll be even more miserable when you're starving hungry. So you need to think about it sensibly. And I think the way I did it was I ran the business in parallel for a couple of years to make sure that I'd built up enough clients and to make sure that I knew what I was doing, because the stuff I'm painting now is better than what I was painting 2 years ago. And so I think, you're going to be spending a lot of time doing your day job. I would make sure it's something that you like. I think follow your heart, because that's the only way you're going to ultimately be successful in terms of, success beyond just finance, but being happy in yourself. But also don't just give up the day job. Make sure you know what you're doing, take your time, build it, run it in parallel, and then hopefully move over at some point in time.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. I do agree. We have to follow our heart. We always have to. Otherwise, we'll end up being miserable. And I suppose you and I are both sitting here and not in a conference somewhere yeah. So thank you very much for your time. Wonderful speaking to you. And
Thank you.
I really enjoy actually knowing a little bit more about the makers and the community, and to know a little bit from where you're coming from and how best can we support each person. So thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Thank you everybody who's joined us, and we'll see you again next Thursday. I'll end this, Darren.
Okay. All right, thanks. Cheers. Bye bye.
Thank you. Cheers. Bye bye. There's my end.